Hi! The great Johann Sebastian Bach set about one particular project that's come to be known as the 48 Preludes and Fugues, sometimes now known as the Well-Tempered Clavier. Now, actually, in reality, what Bach did was to write two sets of 24 Preludes and Fugues, and the idea behind the whole scheme was to write one Prelude and Fugue in each major key and one Prelude and Fugue in each minor key. That made up book one of the 48 Preludes and Fugues, the first 24, and then he did the whole thing over again. But the second time was about 20 years later than the first set. So the first set came out in 1722, and it's from that set that we're going to focus in this little course. And we're going to look at the Prelude and Fugue in F sharp minor, known as BWV859. And as I'm sure you know, BWV is always the reference that is used for works by Bach. No other composer uses BWV. Most composers use opus numbers. Mozart uses K numbers, Köchel numbers. Scarlatti's got his own KP or L numbers. Most people have opus numbers. Bach has BWV numbers. So very useful to get hold of a score of this piece if you haven't already got one before we start working through an analysis of the piece. So it's BWV 859 and it's Prelude and Fugue number 14 from the first book of the 48 Preludes and Fugues, or the Well-Tempered Clavier. Now, clavier is a kind of general name that literally means keyboard. So we're not entirely sure what Bach's intention was, but we tend to think of these as pieces for the harpsichord, but they may well have been played in homes on the clavichord, a rather quieter, more contained instrument. But there's nothing to say, for example, that these pieces couldn't be played on the organ. There's no specific pedal line, so it's more likely to be harpsichord music, but they can work very effectively on the organ, and we just don't know if that was perhaps one of the intentions for them. And they were certainly designed for study purposes, though of course they're not particularly easy to play in many cases. So we're talking about a student who's already got fairly decent keyboard skills. But they're also designed as works in their own right that could be performed by anyone. It's a fantastic collection. In terms of this well-tempered bit, just what we mean by that is also a matter of a little debate. I mean, well-tempered might mean even-tempered, which means that the distance between each semitone is exactly equal. So if we're dealing with equal temperament, that's what we mean. We're not entirely sure that really that's what Bach meant by well-tempered, but we won't get too bogged down in that. It may well be that if it was an even temperament, in other words, these distances between the semitones are all equal, then in fact, each one of these Preludes and Fugues is going to sound the same, i.e. all the major key Preludes and Fugues will sound the same in terms of tonality, and all the minor Preludes and Fugues will sound the same in terms of tonality. But it is possible that he was dealing in a different kind of temperament in which each key would have had its own slightly different personality. So that's kind of, the jury is still out on that one, but that's a bit of background as to what we mean by well-tempered and clavier for the keyboard. So what we're going to do in this course is have a look at the prelude, work out how it's structured, work out what the musical devices are that are being employed and how he puts that prelude together. We're then going to look at the fugue, partly as a means to understand how a fugue works, through understanding how this particular fugue works, and we'll go to the detail of how that's structured and what the characteristics are of the piece. And if you're preparing for an exam and you're wanting some background on this piece, hopefully this course will be particularly useful to you. If you're just wanting to kind of tune into the preludes and fugues through a particular example, this will be useful to you as well. If you're wanting to do some structural and thematic and harmonic analysis, then this film will be useful to you for that as well. And if you just want to appreciate the music from the inside, hopefully this will pick up some insights that will help your appreciation of the music. So that's a brief introduction, and in the next film we're going to get straight into having a look at the prelude.